It's a very full agenda today, so I will try to move through things quickly, but a lot of really exciting information to share with everybody. We just had Michelle is here from Amazon to share with us some information on what they are proposing for Nashville and a few other cities. So as everybody knows, in the chat box, if you have any questions when we get to the public comment, please put them in there. Ashley will be monitoring those, and then we can ask those questions to the commission. So since we are still doing our electronic meetings, I am going to read our electronic meeting procedures. At the beginning of the meeting, all commission members participating electronically shall be identified by roll call so that quorum can be established. Under Executive Order number 71, each time a commission member, staff, or other participant who is using audio-only participation wishes to speak, he or she shall identify themselves in a manner reasonably calculated to permit the public to ascertain the identity of the person speaking. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the governor issued Executive Order number 16, extended by Executive Orders number 34, 51, 60, and 71, authorizing commissions to meet and conduct their essential business by electronic means if the commission determines that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in the light of the COVID-19 outbreak. Before considering items on the agenda, the commission needs to determine by roll call vote that the meeting agenda constitutes essential business of the commission and meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. All votes during the meeting shall be by roll call. Okay, so I'm going to start with the roll call. Jackie Frissix-Warren.
Yes, I'm here.
We're very happy to have you back. Councilmember Colby Sledge.
Present.
James Simmons.
Here.
Laura Coleman.
Present.
Jim Schmitz. Chris Farrell. Okay. Well, I'm going to move to the review and approval of the minutes. If everybody has had a chance to look those over, let me know if there's a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Jackie Frissix-Warren.
Aye.
Councilmember Colby Sledge.
Aye.
James Simmons.
Aye.
Laura Coleman.
Aye.
Jim Schmitz. And Chris Farrell. Okay, great. All right, so Ashley, I'm going to send this one over to you, the project progress and financial update. I think many of you have been updated as far as the Pathways project, the Rosemary. It was had to do with the impoundment of funds, and Ashley can go into more detail of what is happening with that funding.
Sure thing. Thanks, Gina. So just covering some bases here. As a reminder, the generous grant from Regions of $250,000 was added to our general funding pool for round 8. So that's our upcoming funding round that we'll be awarding at the end of February. As the rest of the Housing Trust Fund Commission was notified in December on the 16th, Pathway has returned their funding award for the development of their development, the Rosemary, which was a development for adults with intellectual disabilities and senior tenants, which was awarded in round 7 due to some land acquisition issues created by the impoundment of funding early in 2020. With that returned amount of 1.695, that brings our total funding for round 8 to 7,445 for what we'll be awarding next month. Some final drawdowns did happen since we did not meet in December. So since November, we had a couple in round 5. So Our Place completed their final draw for 23 units for differently abled folks in partnership with Woodbine Community Organization. Woodbine Community Organization also made their final draw for their $2 million award for 106 units for low-income seniors and or differently abled folks. In round 6, Rebuilding Together Nashville completed their 3rd draw on some rehab projects that they have in 5 homes in Bordeaux. They also submitted a beautiful report that talks a lot about their partnership with Barnes that I'll share with everyone as a follow-up to this email as part of the minutes. It's wonderfully done, and grateful to Caitlin for sending that over to me. And then Woodbine Community Organization also completed their final draw on a mixed income development for 71 units in Elm Hill Flats, which is another $2 million commitment. So grateful that they are finishing up some great projects. And then in round 7, Habitat for Humanity submitted their 4th draw for a down payment assistance for 4 completed homes in Park Preserve. Rosie Thompson was actually one of those that received the down payment assistance that we funded through Barnes, and I actually went to her home dedication in December. That was great, as well as Deputy Mayor Haywood. And then I spoke at a home dedication in Park Preserve last week. So we've supported about 92 of the homes that were actually built in Park Preserve. I say we as the ephemeral we, right? As part of the Barnes Fund. And then Habitat also submitted a 2nd draw on some construction on 3 homes in Park Preserve as well. So that's a lot of work that's been done in the last couple of months. You know, it's amazing to see how much work that these organizations are still putting in despite all of the challenges and construction bottlenecks caused by COVID, the delays with the tornado in early March last year, and then obviously the funding impoundment from last spring as well. So things are still getting done out there, and it's great work. That's all I have, Gina.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ashley. I don't know if there are any comments in the public comment section, anything in the chat box?
Not thus far.
Okay. We can circle back to that later on if everybody does have something they want to add later on. But I'll move on to our guests that we're thankful to have today. So Michelle is from Amazon and is going to discuss a very large $2 billion commitment they have made to affordable housing in the cities that they are largely present in. And we would love to hear more about that program. I'm sure many attendees have questions and are excited to hear more details of your program.
Good afternoon. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I think we are having a little bit of technical difficulty for our other 2 Amazonians who are going to join us, so I hope they can make it in. But again, thank you, Chair Emanuel. My name is Michelle Gaskett-Brown. I am the Public Policy Manager for Amazon. Again, we are so excited to be here and share with you some of what we've been doing since we've been in Nashville for about 1.5 years, as well as explain our new affordable housing commitment. I'd love to introduce our External Affairs Manager, Courtney Ross, who has recently moved over from the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, who is going to give a little overview of our engagement in Nashville. Okay, it looks like Courtney is in as an attendee. Is she able to?
She's on our panelist list now, so she should be able to unmute. Says Courtney is on.
Okay.
So, not sure.
All right. All right, well, in the interest of time, I don't want to hold anyone up if Courtney can't make it. We just wanted to give her.
I'm in.
Okay, there you go.
Just in the neck of time. Hey, everybody. Hi, Gina. It's so good to see you. And I apologize. I think we had an issue on our end being blocked. So thank you so much. Since I'm late, I won't take up too much of your time. Everybody, Michelle, give me a nod if you can hear me. Yes, okay. So I'm Courtney Ross. I am the fairly new external affairs person with Amazon. I know some of you from my work at the Chamber for the last 12 years. I joined Amazon in September. But again, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time today. I hope Catherine can get on while I'm giving you a few words of the ways that we've been able to engage in Nashville to address some of the pressing and long-term needs here in Nashville. And I'm really excited about the work that we've got planned to do in 21 as well. But just a quick recap: in December and January, as you might have read or heard, we committed significantly to several organizations in Nashville to help many of those that were significantly impacted by the pandemic, and other incredible organizations in Nashville. Through the Nashville Grad Program, we're helping more students with those wraparound services going through the Drive 55 program. Our Future Engineer Initiative is funding computer science curriculum in all 72 MNPS schools. We completed the fundraising campaign for the YWCA's pet shelter and made a significant donation to the Northwest YMCA. So we're really excited about all of those donations and others. Of course, after the Christmas Day bombing, we were able to step in with the help of our operations team to fulfill the Amazon wish list from the Community Resource Center. We also were able to make financial donations to the Community Resource Center and Box 55. We'll continue to be a part of the cleanup effort on 2nd Avenue. So we are definitely committed to working with all those involved in that. We're also really proud to support many of the cultural institutions and musicians that make Nashville what it is. Late last year, we were able to help the Bell Court reopen. We worked with the Nashville Symphony to help with the musicians that had not been able to work during the pandemic. And then most recently, we were so proud and excited to announce our donation to the National Museum of African American Music. So we're really excited about all the things, like I said, we have going here in Nashville. We're proud to be here in Nashville. We'll move into our new office later this year. So we're committed to helping Nashville be a better place and look forward to working with all of you and talking more about affordable housing today. So I'm going to turn it back to Michelle, and hopefully Catherine was able to join, but it's so good to see so many familiar houses and familiar faces, and thank you for having us today.
All right, it looks like Catherine was not able to get in. Catherine, are you there?
Let me see. I was able to get in using the password Metro, and then Ashley was able to let me in as a panelist.
Okay. All right, it looks like Catherine is not able to make it in, so I will just cover for her. Catherine Burrell is our head of community development in Amazon. She is located in our DC office. And again, if she was here, she would say it's really been a pleasure to discuss Amazon's commitment to affordable housing nationally and right here in Nashville. We are huge admirers of the Barnes Fund Commission's vital work to foster long-term housing affordability in Nashville. Amazon shares that goal. At Amazon, we believe the private and public sectors can collaborate to help address affordable housing affordability challenges. We are committed to leveraging our scale to support innovative housing affordability initiatives. As you all know, on January 6th, Amazon launched the Housing Equity Fund, a $2 billion initiative to preserve and create more than 20,000 affordable housing units in Nashville, Washington State's Puget Sound region, and Arlington, Virginia, 3 communities we proudly call home. Through this program, Amazon is providing below-market capital in the form of loans, lines of credit, and grants to preserve and create 20,000 homes affordable for moderate to low-income families in these areas. Amazon's effort will support households making between 30% and 80% of the area's median income, less than $65,850 per year for a family of 4 in the Nashville-Davidson County region. It is our belief that targeting our resources to families in this income range can do the most good, addressing a gap for moderate income workers who are often spending 50% or more of their income on housing, enduring long commutes for lower rents, or simply struggling to find suitable affordable housing. Amazon's Housing Equity Fund is unique from other private sector efforts in 3 ways. First, our scale allows us to deploy efforts across a broader range of geographies. We will create and preserve more than 20,000 affordable homes stretching from Nashville to Arlington, Virginia, to the Puget Sound region of Washington State. Second is our speed. We are focusing on housing preservation as a key component, which will house moderate to low-income families more rapidly than new construction. We are also providing affordable housing developers with fast access to capital at below market rates, creating appealing terms that enable the creation or preservation of existing buildings where affordability would have been lost to competitive market rate developers. Third is our emphasis on equity. Housing affordability issues disproportionately affect communities of color. We're focused not only on equity in terms of who has access to housing, but also on these organizations that are helping address the housing challenges. As we build partnerships and make new commitments, we're dedicated to bringing diverse voices to the table to be a part of the solution. To that end, beyond investments in specific real estate deals, we are actively supporting organizations serving communities of color that may not typically qualify for or compete for investments. A recent example is in December when we allocated $2.25 million to establish the Housing Resiliency Fund at the Housing Fund in Nashville, a minority-led nonprofit organization with a long history of serving the Nashville community. This donation will assist families impacted by the property tax increase and more generally help preserve home ownership, a key to long-term wealth building. As part of our more recent announcement from January, we're committing an additional $125 million in cash grants to public-private partnerships and minority-led organizations, businesses, and nonprofits to help them develop a more inclusive solution to the affordable housing crisis, keeping the needs of communities of color at the forefront of the discussion. Thank you again for having us. While governments at the local, state, and federal level have the capacity to implement more effective housing policies, Amazon believes the private and public sectors can work together to make meaningful progress in the area. We are committed to being part of the solution, and in our hometown communities like Nashville, we are excited to invest directly in helping address local housing challenges. And I'm told that Catherine is now in, so she is available to answer any questions you may have. Catherine?
Yes, and I'm here, and I apologize. I am listed as Michelle Brown as well.
Thank you both. Commissioners, does anybody have any questions for Michelle or Courtney?
Yeah, this is Becky, and thank you. Welcome to Nashville, and thank you for your commitment to affordable housing. You know, I heard words like innovative and equity, and particularly focused on race equity. And I wonder if you could just give some examples of some things that you've done in other cities that embody those two things.
Yeah, that's a great question. When we talk about equity, we're talking about equity both in terms of income as well as demographics, race, and the like, just to clarify. And also, we've been creative with how we've approached solutions. So for example, in HQ2, we had an opportunity to purchase a market rate 825 unit community that went on the market 1 block away from HQ2. That allowed us to create workforce housing directly adjacent to our headquarters. The community is located in an area with limited affordable housing. Arlington County, Virginia doesn't have a lot of affordable housing resources. They don't have a huge housing production trust fund, and they don't have a lot of land that is available for affordable housing. We were able to step in and provide over $380 million of funding to convert a market rate community into a workforce housing community to make sure that there was a level of affordability in that area that has a lot of amenities and a lot of resources. What was creative about it is the fact that the mission-driven owner, the nonprofit owner of the property, really focuses on workforce housing, but also brings in private sector to be able to fund their buildings. We all know that government resources are limited, and so the project was 100% funded by private sector. Amazon was the bulk of the funding, as well as an impact pool that was created in the capital region, funded by a number of different private sector players, came in and contributed a smaller amount, in addition to the nonprofit partner who was able to kick in about $5 million of equity. We've also been able to support in the Puget Sound region, the King County Housing Authority. The housing authority there has quietly been acquiring existing multifamily properties since the 1990s. Most people who live, most housing authorities, when we think about them, we think about public housing, we think about subsidized housing. This is actually a portfolio of properties that they've been able to acquire outside of their public housing, kind of traditional housing stock. And what they do is they keep the rents low. So they look for multifamily buildings in areas that have access to public transportation, have a lot of amenities, have quality schools, and they've been able to maintain those properties as affordable for decades. What's interesting about their model is that most people who live in their buildings don't actually know that they live in their buildings. So we've seen some really creative solutions that we can support. We're particularly interested in solutions that not only make sure that there is a level of affordability, but that affordability is tied to some other features. So for example, maybe there is public transportation. That can be a transit station or a bus line that provides real access to job centers. And so when we talk about innovation and affordable housing, we're looking for those creative approaches. The last thing that I'll mention is that in HQ2, for the project that we were able to support, that project sponsor also provides wraparound services. And they're wraparound services for workforce housing units. So in our region, most of the residents who are going to live in the building are going to be your entry-level Hill staffers, your nonprofit workers, your nurses, your store managers. So the level of services that they're going to need are going to be a little different than your extremely low-income housing. But they are still providing support services to make sure that the residents living in their building feel part of the community, that there is inclusive property management, that there are community activities. And if there is some sort of resource, whether it's financial counseling or other similar service that they can provide, that they have the resources to be able to support those families with the goal of making sure that not only can they live in the unit and afford the unit, but hopefully they can then, when they leave the unit, be in a stronger financial position, maybe to purchase a house or to really continue to grow in the region.
I have a question, if you don't mind. I know that obviously you take a lot of pride in the things that you all have been able to do through Amazon. And I'm just curious what you see your role in being. I know that a lot of the nonprofits might have a similar question about whether this is a donation or if you want your workers to also be involved in some of the actual labor that is a part of doing nonprofit work, or is it more of like a corporate sponsorship where they, you know, acknowledge you in their annual reports, or if there are other reporting requirements that they would want to be aware of, you know, prior to kind of submitting any proposal?
Yeah. We really see ourselves as a funder here to support the project sponsors who are doing the hard work. Our role is not to step into their shoes, but to really make sure that they have the financial tools to be able to provide the affordable housing, and also to raise awareness of the good work that they're doing. As partners look to and are interested in receiving Amazon funding, I will say that we are a data-driven company, so we do look for those partners to report out to us what level of what incomes the households are that they're serving. And we're pointing to SAFE metrics, their national metrics, affordable housing metric system that is used. We're looking at things like, do those households have children? That's really going to drive how we're structuring our program, and whether or not we need to be mindful of bedroom size. Right now, we've been making sure that there's affordability across bedroom size. But if there are other services and amenities that we can advocate for within Amazon, we're going to use that data to make sure that our partners are fully supported.
Hey, Ashley, I had a quick question, if that's all right. So you mentioned a little bit about, and I was looking through sort of the Arlington model, and you mentioned that y'all primarily are looking at where you're the primary lender, I guess, in some of those. Have y'all looked at, or do you have examples of where you have been kind of a partner lender, or you're a partner with a developer, for instance, who maybe is in the midst of building or has already built, and then Amazon comes in and provides that additional equity?
Yes. So for the initial two projects, for one of them, we were the primary lender. And for the second project that is located in King County, we're essentially an equal lender with the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority has the ability to issue bonds. So they're able to bring their own financing. So our dollars are essentially on par with the housing authority's dollars. We have seen private developers willing to have conversations with Amazon about also coming in and providing affordable housing within existing buildings. And a lot of that is because the Amazon dollars don't carry the same level of regulation as some of the traditional affordable housing funding sources like a LIHTC or tax credits do. And so we're able to be more flexible. We anticipate with the bulk of our investments that we're not going to be the primary lender. Crystal House really is an exception to the rule. It was one of those opportunities that was too good for us to pass up. We anticipate that going forward that we're really going to be in the secondary position, and we're going to be able to provide low cost capital to make the projects possible. We want to make sure that our funding is flexible, because the last thing we want to do for most of these mission driven organizations, they have anywhere from 5 to 8 funding sources. We want them to be able to move quickly. So the more that we can simplify any funding restrictions that we may have or any requirements that we have to allow them to be able to move quickly, and also to keep their transaction costs low, because that's going to make it more possible for them to provide lower rents. That's really what we're focused on.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, tagging on that question, I'm glad to hear you say it, because that's one thing that we're missing out here in being able to go and get more units out there is having funds that can be leveraged to be able to do more. And to see you coming in a secondary or a mezzanine position that at low cost capital, to give it that lower cost on the front end, to be able to afford to do more of those units, that's really going to stretch the dollar a lot further doing it that way than if you were the primary lender or investor. So glad to hear that. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
I actually have a couple of more questions. One of them is, we always talk about first dollar in, last dollar in, and there are pros and cons to both. I'd like to hear y'all's philosophy of that. And also, one of the disadvantages of being in government is that we have one funding cycle a year, and yet opportunities come out throughout the year. Right. We're not nimble the way an Amazon would be. And so I'm wondering how y'all see using that advantage, and how we can be good partners since we don't have that advantage and you do.
That's right. For our funding, we're really looking for projects that, but for Amazon's investment, would not be possible. So we're not looking for projects that already have tax credits, already have the bulk of the funding, and may need just a sliver of funding, grant funding, to be able to get it over the finish line. And we've received a few of those unsolicited proposals to date. We really want projects that are big, ambitious, and but for Amazon would not move forward. And quite frankly, and when I say big, I don't necessarily mean size. It may be something that's really important to a jurisdiction to see a specific project advance. And that the traditional funding sources either were out of cycle or carry too many restrictions to make the project possible. And I appreciate the point of typically, particularly for government funding, there are government funding cycles. And just like a Crystal House, we could not have predicted when the owner was going to put the property on the market. And so our goal is to be able to provide clear funding sources that allow mission-driven partners to move quickly without having a specific funding cycle tied to when our dollars are available. We really want to make sure that the housing is produced, and particularly in this environment, we're seeing some really interesting opportunities pop up because vacancy rates are much higher in a lot of the multifamily properties. We're seeing opportunities in areas where maybe a landlord or property owner has been able to maintain affordable rents for some time and maintain a quality multifamily property, but they're finding that right now they just can't continue to carry that property. Those are the kinds of opportunities, creative opportunities that we're looking to make sure that mission-driven partners, we can support them and they can step in and maintain the affordability. So in order to do that, we have to be flexible with when we're able to provide our funding to different projects.
Great. Thank you very much. I think we're all excited that you're able to.
Well, we are very excited to be in Nashville. I will tell you, we have a great team on the ground, and we welcome any thoughts or suggestions that this group has because of all of the work that you've been doing on affordable housing, partners that we should be talking to or aware of. We welcome any information that you may have because, quite frankly, by continuing to have these conversations and continuing to partner, we're going to make the work on affordable housing, which is really, really difficult work, more possible. And that's really our goal. So we really appreciate you're taking the time to listen to us and to talk to us about our affordable housing efforts, and welcome an opportunity to continue to keep you updated on what we're doing in Nashville.
There is one question from someone in the audience. So Brent Elrod asks that Michelle mentioned a 125 commitment in cash grants. Is that specifically targeted to minority-led organizations, or is that the total amount of cash grants Amazon intends to award out of the $2 billion commitment?
The $125 million is focused on two areas. It's focused on partnerships with non-traditional public agencies, and we specifically are targeting non-traditional public agencies like your transit agencies or your schools, colleges or universities, or your port authorities, because a lot of those agencies are moving into affordable housing. They have land, quite frankly, and their customers are the same residents that we're trying to serve. And so they have a strong interest in seeing more affordable housing being built, but they don't have the staff. They don't have the dollars to cover any of the pre-development expenses and all the other the work that goes into creating an affordable housing program. So we're looking to support those partners. The bulk of the funding is going to be dedicated to minority developers and minority-led organizations. And those dollars really are intended to make sure that the minority developers are able to have, just like those non-traditional public agencies, the capital to be able to fund upfront expenses and then access the broader $2 billion capital pool.
And then there's just one other question from the folks in the audience that ask how the nonprofits would be able to get in touch with you. Would you prefer that you just use the proposal form that you put in your media?
Yes, we're asking for nonprofits who are interested in learning more. And I say actually mission-driven organizations, because there are some private developers we're pleasantly surprised are interested in our program. We're asking that mission-driven organizations email us at housingequityfund@amazon.com. What we're doing is we're collecting interest at that email address, one, to make sure that we have a clear list of folks when we do release our solicitation, that we can go back to, we can understand what level of interest there is in the program, but also that if there are specific questions, that we're mindful of that as we're unrolling our program. And so if you are interested in learning more, or if you are an organization that has opportunities that you want to make sure are on our radar, please email us at housingequityfund@amazon.com.
Great, thank you. Ashley, are there any more comments in the box? Well, great. Well, thank you, Catherine, Courtney, and Michelle. It's great for you to spend so much time with us and answer our questions. We hope we'll be seeing you soon and working on some projects moving forward.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you again.
Okay, we have another visitor today, Councilmember Gloria Hauser. We appreciate you joining us as well. It sounds like you'll be talking to us about some legislation you are moving forward with.
Thank you. Excuse me. And if you see a little white post, my dog decided she had to sit on my lap. So this is Athena. The reason I think that Kobe had asked me to join the call today was to bring to your attention, ask for your guidance, which not expecting that you have the answers today, but I would like you to look at the situation, and that has to do with people who deliberately try to perform affordable housing fraud. And the reason I bring this up is we had a situation with a home that we sold last July, The home did not have Barnes Fund money in it, so it did not have all the legal verbiage on the first loan, but we had a second loan that did have the restrictive verbiage, that it had to be affordable for 20 years, etc. So this individual who bought the home through their mother, who qualified for the affordable housing, all the little checklists that we needed to go through, we went through, they agreed, blah, 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 with no intention of doing that. And the reason we were able to be alerted so quickly was they were so proud of themselves, they talked to a neighbor and told the neighbor how they were going to flip the house and make $200,000. So that put us on the alert to start watching out and to find out. And so as soon as they listed it, we got with our attorneys, and basically now it's in foreclosure. It has cost our organization almost $9,000 so far to do this. But we felt that it was necessary because we didn't want folks to think they could just game the system. And so the reason I'm bringing this up to your attention is I think as an affordable housing industry that we need to come up with more than just the legal language that's attached to a deed, but other processes. And I understand in other areas of the country, there are some very specific processes in place that we do not have in Tennessee to sort of head these situations off earlier. And I did want to bring that to your attention because this individual had gone through all the checklists, had filled out all the forms, but still felt that they could game the system. And I have feeling by the way they have handled this, and if they have tried to challenge us in court, but of course they lost, is that this may not be the first time they have done this. And so I wanted to make sure and bring this to your attention and try to engage you in part of the solution so that affordable housing stays affordable for the 20 years or however long we want to make sure that it is part of the affordable housing stock. And I think this is just as critical as building new housing, is make sure that we preserve the housing that we now have in the affordable housing stock. Plus, I know as a council member, if I feel that someone is just gaming the system, we're going to be less likely to want to vote for putting money into programs to support affordable housing if we think that it's just going to be subject to fraud. And so, as I say, I really need your help in coming up with some methodologies that the nonprofits and the for-profit organizations that are involved in affordable housing can easily follow. One of the things that I've been told is that in some other areas of the country, there are certain checks and balances, such as yearly reporting and monitoring that is done by the nonprofits that are involved, but they are also reimbursed for their time. And that's one of the things that we have not done in Nashville or in Tennessee, is reimburse any nonprofits or any organization, and nor has the government created a department to follow up and make sure that the guidelines of affordable housing are being adhered to. And I want to bring that up to the table because we can't build it fast enough if it's going out the door and being sold for profit. And any questions anybody has, I'll be glad to answer in regards to what we have done. As I say, we have gone through the courts to foreclose, and we will be buying the house back and then putting it on the market and being even more careful than we have been in the past on who the buyers are.
Chair, do you mind if I ask a question of Ashley? And Councilmember, thank you for bringing this. Councilmember brought this to my attention as well. We actually had a correspondence on it because it's in District 17. And the resident had brought it to both Councilmember Hauser's attention and mine at the time that it was occurring. Ashley, what kinds of, when we do our typical contracts, what kinds of, deed restrictions or shared equity? I mean, I know it varies, but this seems to be a for sale product problem in particular, or potential problem, I should say, since it does open up to a chain of buyers and sellers down the line. What kinds of safeguards do we already have in place for Barnes funded for sale housing?
With Barnes specifically, we did add language to the contract fairly recently. So round 6 was when we added that language to ensure that we have the ability to go back and do income certifications every year. So they would have to submit a document essentially certifying that the residents of the home are still meeting income requirements to certify that they are within affordable housing, right? So that will be that applies specifically to round 6 and on. So round 6 and 7 and now 8 going forward. So the first income certification that we would be doing would be in the fall of this year, and that's a process that Hannah and I have talked about and something that we're going to work on ironing exactly what that looks like out prior. Just waiting for her to get back from maternity leave, so we have some projects, but that is that's one of them. So that would be the primary safeguard that we have in place as relevant to this particular issue.
When we have, because we've had extension requests, we have a couple before us today, but when we've had extension requests, is it possible if those extension requests are coming from rounds prior to round 6 and involve for sale housing to, as part of the stipulation for the extension, to write in basically the same sorts of for sale or the same sorts of income verification that we have now?
I would rely on Macy to answer that definitively. It's not part of their original contracts, but I would, Macy, do you have any feedback on that particular point?
So, I mean, we filed deed restrictions on the property, and there's the language in the contract. I mean, does that help?
Yeah, I think I just want to make sure, and Macy, maybe you can help clarify. It sounds like we have some additional safeguards in place starting with round 6 and moving forward, but that we did not have those safeguards in prior to round 6. So my thought is, we've had several of these. When an extension request comes up, maybe one of the processes that we could go through is to review, to say, are all the safeguards that we require of new applicants, of current applicants, are they in this prior round or in this extension request? And if not, are we able to make those are we able to strengthen, I guess, that contract through the extension to ensure that that this issue in particular, this potential resale and income verification issue, is resolved?
So one idea or one thing we could do is when we're amending the contract, we're amending a certain section of the contract. We're, extending the term. So we're changing the language and say it's section B6. We could also, in that amendment, insert the new language that's in the new contracts and say, look, if we have to get an extension, we've also got to include this language. And I think that's probably the best and easiest way to do it.
Got it. Thanks. Well, Chair and Commissioners, I would just suggest that maybe when we're looking at these extensions, we consider that. Thanks, Macy. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ash.
May I ask a question? Yes, one of the things that when we have the deed restrictions, which are great and they ultimately protect us, but they don't stop someone from trying. And I like the idea of the yearly certification because that kind of brings it to the buyer's attention on a more frequent basis and lets them know that we're paying attention. If this neighbor had not alerted us, we would not have known until the new buyer called for a payoff on our loan. And that makes you scramble at the last minute. So I do like the idea of some sort of yearly process. I do have a question in regard to that. What if a person suddenly just becomes more successful? So, they qualified when they purchased the home, but 5 years later, they're in a better position. When we talk about having the yearly income verification, what happens if now they are in a better position? Does that impact them in any way, or as long as it's still the same person living in the house?
Council member, if that question is for me, I do not have that contract language in front of me, but I can look at it and I can certainly get back to you. So I don't know what the current contracts say, what the new language is.
Well, I don't know what it is on home buyer, but I know that we have talked about this in the past in terms of rental. And we want people to be more successful and to have and increase their income. So really what we have looked at with rentals is income eligibility coming in. And I believe that they're held harmless for their success in terms of, and I don't know, you know, it'd be interesting to have a philosophical conversation about how that relates to home ownership.
And another thing that I'd like you to consider is whether, and I don't know if this is possible or not, that if we have some sort of certification that this is affordable housing, no matter what funding sources went in, that they would be able to put these sort of deed restrictions in place. Because you may have someone that, like in this particular house, we didn't use the Barnes Fund. But yet we still on our loan put these restrictions in. So and I'm not sure where this question would lie in creating that kind of affordable housing name, certification, whatever you want to call it, that would allow whomever was selling that home to have this, just as you could have other restrictions on a deed that ride with the property forever. I would like to see us talk with the attorneys to see what kind of restrictions we could put on properties, regardless of their funding, if we decided that these were properties we wanted to always remain affordable.
And Councilmember Hauser, you're saying that's a citywide, that would be a citywide thing, not in particular for this commission, for the Barnes Fund. That is more just general affordable housing that is created in the city. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, not necessarily dependent on any specific funding. And I just don't know if it was something that had been done in other areas where you create, there isn't some sort of a certification that says this is affordable housing. So maybe that housing, the encouragement is in some other manner, if it's not only Barnes Fund type funding, but maybe some other sort of incentive for someone to build and sell affordable housing. And I don't know what that is. I'm just kind of like looking to those of you who are in this every day to maybe tell us what other areas are doing to create something that is an affordable housing stock that may or may not be receiving specific type funding, but that we want to deem it, just as you have historical neighborhoods, that you have some sort of an overlay on a property that says it will be affordable housing for X period of time.
And I think this also plays into a question that someone asked in the chat about what happens what kind of penalties are in place for people that try to circumvent the covenant. I think that there's a lot of work being done on what some of those things might look like as part of the housing task force that the mayor put together, and Gina's actually on that particular task force. I don't know exactly what all that will cover, but I think that certainly that is more what you're talking about versus Barnes Fund specifically. But I would definitely reach out to John Bunton as well, who is kind of controlling that housing task force. Normally, if Hannah were here, she'd talk through some of that with you, but I think reaching out to him right now would be the best. And I'm happy to follow up with you offline with his email, so you can reach out to him.
Thank you. And thank you for letting me join. I just felt like this was something that needed to be brought to your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to our next piece of new business. This is something that you've all gotten a few emails about. Eddie has joined us as a panelist so that he can discuss. There is a discussion about affordable housing resources contract. The short story, and I hope many of you were able to read Eddie's letter that he sent to us, is that there was a breach in some language in the contract. I have spoken with Macy about it, what our options are. I will let her speak to the whole commission or answer any of your questions about that. But there are a few options of what we can decide to do as a commission in how the funding for the project moves forward. And I would really like to invite Eddie to speak to us first, or actually, Macy, I think it would be good if you would let everybody know what is the contract breach exactly. And then Eddie, if then you can follow up and basically give us an explanation of how we got there and why. And then I think the commissioners at that point will likely have questions for both of you before we go on how to move forward.
So Metro has a contract with Affordable Housing Resources, and Affordable Housing Resources received a back tax lot from Metro, and they also received Barnes Fund dollars. For this particular project, it's my understanding that Mr. Latimer used his wife's company to construct some affordable housing, which is a violation of his contract with Metro. So Hannah brought it to his attention shortly before she went out on maternity leave. I've spoken with his attorney, and I believe Eddie had maybe mentioned it to a commissioner, but had not actually received approval from the commission to deviate from his contract. So that's sort of where we are. We've got a breach of his contract. It's my understanding that construction is mostly done. And so it's up to you all to decide how you want to move forward with this contract, how you want to move forward with future grants of money or properties. And I will be interested to see how you handle this one. I don't think this has come up before.
You're muted, Gina.
Okay, you ready?
We're ready.
Tracy, if I could just do one thing, one thing. I did not hire her. I recused myself from all board meetings where that discussion took place and where she was hired. It's okay, just to make that really clear, okay? But here's what happened is that we had a contract with Auburn University's Rural Studio to build these 4 highly energy efficient homes. We were the only urban city in 15 years that's been allowed to do this. And so we were very honored to have this chance. And their issue with Auburn is they've never worked with the codes department, and they didn't know if you could hit the energy efficiency in the public using common subs that they can, where they have their students build the homes and they have a lot more control. So that's our part in this ongoing academic study by Auburn University. So when we got ready to get this started, it was the fall of 19, we started looking for contractors and we struck out, and we were having very little luck finding anybody interested. We talked to quite a few people. And at that point in time, we presented that to the board on February, I think it's the 11th, it's attachment 1 on that letter. And that point in time, we presented the problem to the board. In that part of time, it was brought up that my wife was a graduate of Lipscomb University School of Sustainability and had an interest in this, but we all talked about it being very problematic. So the board sent me back out, at which time I contacted 17 or 18 brand new green building people. Now, the key is they have to be a green GC, because every week they have to have an 1 to 2 hour phone call with the faculty at Auburn talking about issues they are dealing with. So when we took this to our normal general contractors, which we have 3, they all said, no, we don't want to do that. And so we went through and explored through the 17 or 18 people which we talked to on the phone and or met with, because this was pre-COVID. Not one of them had an interest, and we didn't find one of them that would even look at a home valued under $300,000. And so we finally got one contractor who agreed to do a bid, and after some really heavy courting, they submitted a bid, but it was an incomplete bid. It didn't have anything about dealing with the site prep, landscaping, had nothing to deal with concrete. It was just an incomplete bid. All it was the sticks and bricks on the 4 walls. So at that point in time, the discussion became more serious about hiring Honeybee Builders. That's my wife's company. And so that's when I left the room and they left. Okay, so, but it's very important is that when the board, after the February board meeting, the board told me to go out and talk to all these people, which you have a complete report of, is attachment number 2. We had to, well, let's see, but what's important to know is that when we went out there and did this, we were I went and met with one of the commissioners because I didn't know how to deal with this. We were very much aware that this was going to be problematic. You know, nonprofits deal with conflict a lot, so we're very sensitive to doing it and how to deal with it. And I just cannot apologize enough that we're at this place now. I cannot apologize enough that we're sort of out of sort with one of our best partners in town. You know, I can take the blame for it. But what happened is between the time that we talked to the commissioner, and that commissioner was great. They immediately followed up and gave me a list and an email of what to do. We began doing exactly what we were told to do, and then suddenly the tornado hits. And so after the tornado hits, as y'all are aware, the mayor needed to get all hands on deck, so he pulled Hannah out from being there full time and put her over here doing tornado recovery. And every phone call I was on, she was on. I know she was extremely busy in the tornado recovery world where she was really needed. And the Barnes Fund does not meet for almost 3 months, 10 days short of 3 months. So we didn't have anyone to take this to follow up with this on. And it just fell between the cracks. I mean, between dealing with the tornado and the COVID, it followed up, and we got very involved at the federal level with dealing with the COVID programs. And I failed to get back to you. And that was my fault. And I am very sad and sorry about that. But so we started the home, which we started much later after that attachment number 2, and we got it going, and we've built the home ahead of schedule, on budget, for a very low developer fee. And that's where we are today. And when this became, after that newspaper article, and this was raised, I know at least 1 or 2 commissioners raised this issue, that at that point in time, we stopped work per Tracy's request, and we are still sitting there waiting to finish these homes up. They're about 95% complete. We haven't done a thing there, and we just need to know what to do next.
Yes, and I did ask Eddie's attorney to ask him to stop work on the projects until you all decided how you wanted to proceed, just because he was in violation of the contract.
Thank you, Eddie. You know, you've always been a great partner to the Barnes Fund, and that's why we wanted to make sure you could come here and speak to us. I appreciate your detailed letter. I was able to read through that earlier before our meeting. But what I want to do before we propose anything or anything else, I would like to invite the other commissioners to ask you some questions, if they have any, before we discuss how to move forward.
Chair, I've got a couple of, I guess, comments and that are paired with a question, and I want to echo the chair's comments as well regarding Eddie and the work of affordable housing resources. And full disclosure here, these are also in District 17. So I will make that point as the sitting council member for that district. What I found interesting in the letter and going through is, and Eddie, you referred to sort of the efforts that the board went through and that the board asked you to take regarding other contractors, other GCs, is that it appears, at least from the notes, at least from what you've submitted to us, that unfortunately, I think this is an economic reality more than anything else, that a lot of sustainable building that's being done in the region right now is luxury. It is, I mean, there are several notes of GCs that say they only build energy efficient new homes that are over 3,000 square feet, which clearly this project is not. And so it's a learning point for me, I guess, to review those notes to see that there's a market issue that I think we have to be looking at as commissioners when we talk through potential projects that look to combine affordability and sustainability, which I think we as a commission have talked about several times, because they can go hand in hand. But if we're not acknowledging the sort of market realities of who actually builds these and at what cost, this is going to come up again, I guess is what I'm saying to commissioners in the chair, that if we don't monitor this now, it will definitely come up again. Eddie, what I might ask on that note is, as you went through these, obviously we do have resources in town, like, Lipscomb's sustainability school, I guess I would say, that Doc Galbraith runs. Like, kind of when you were going through this process before coming to what appears, at least from the notes, that Honeybee was sort of a GC of last resort, is there anything you would add to the notes here that you found that you either thought was a resource and turned out not to be, or that maybe there was a perception that there were more GCs out here that would do this work that wouldn't? Is there any other context you want to add to that note? Because that's what stood out to me, is it seems like there's a shortage of this work, and maybe we're not cognizant of that, or at least I wasn't.
Well, Councilman, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you acknowledging this is in your district, and thank you. But here's I think it is an issue, is that there's a lot of money and affordability. The only group that we found in the whole city that would even look at a home under, like, I think it was 2,500 square feet, the smallest we saw, was E3 Innovate, and they're not general contractors. They go in and work with the contractor to help them get it to the sustainable requirements, but they're very expensive. It's almost like having two GCs. And that's you're right. That's the issue, is that this market, the ability to build sustainably for startup, low income, first time buyers is very challenging because of the lack of GC support. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that answer. I guess the one follow-up I would say is, was there anywhere else that you looked at that you felt was going to be a resource and didn't? And like I said, I think specifically about Lipscomb and what they're producing, and I would have thought, quite frankly, there'd be more people coming out of there who were interested in work like that.
Well, there were conversations, not by me, but by others, with Lipscomb, and I do not recall any direction being given. Where I do know several of our board members had suggestions, and though we did follow up with those, but I don't recall anything. But again, they were not first person calls. They were a third party that made that call.
Thanks, Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have a question? Right.
No, I would just add, I am the commissioner that Eddie talked to, and I think that the process went through recusing himself at the board, and the research is a due diligence that a nonprofit would normally do, and follow was kind of a model for how you do that. I think the issue here is that this is Barnes money, it's city taxpayer money, and the contract is clear. That's why I referred him back to Hannah and to our legal counsel, because those things are out of my my expertise.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kathy. To me, this is mostly an issue of there's a legal contract in place. We are city funded. I think there comes a little more scrutiny with things like that than there would be private dollars. And as such, we have to be good stewards of those dollars. And, you know, in talking through with Macy some of the options that we have, I think we want to make sure we're doing something that will work moving forward for other organizations. You know, I mean, I think, Eddie, the letter you gave us was great, very, very detailed, all the information. I think we would ask you in questions. Like I said before, I really appreciate that. I think the challenge for us is moving forward, knowing these are public dollars, knowing that what do we have to do that will not be heavily scrutinized, that this, you know, essentially kind of after these have been completed, we are trying to sort of rectify it. And I mean, the options really are, you know, in discussing with Macy, I mean, we could amend the contract. I don't think Metro Legal, that is their first choice. That's an option. We could amend it to where this is okay. We could do, you know, just across the board, we could say, well, these funds were used. It was in breach of contract. We could ask those funds to be returned. We could not award future Barnes rounds as some sort of penalty. It's a really tough place to be because I think the project you're doing is really great, Eddie. And like you said, I do think you were met with a lot of challenges because, you know, as an architect, I know there are not many green home builders that are doing this at an affordable dollar amount. So I definitely appreciate that that is an issue and you're trying to still provide this to the community. So I don't know if I have the exact answer for how to move forward. I wish we weren't presented with it, but we are. And I do think we need to make a decision on how to move forward as a commission. So I don't know if any other commissioners have a thought. You know, those are just three options that I had discussed previously. There may be others, and I would definitely welcome hearing any of those.
Is Colby still here? One of my concerns is just the integrity of the fund and the reputation of the fund with council. And so I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts about what the council might expect us to do.
Sure. I think it's a really fair question. So the conversations, and I think it's noted fairly accurately in the attachment that Mr. Latimer provided, was there was a lot of conversation on this most recent Barnes Fund round. There tends to sort of be an ebb and flow in council on scrutiny of the funds. I will say our most recent conversation about affordability, I'll say affordable housing as a whole. I can't remember if it was targeted toward a Barnes Fund project or something with a pilot, but there was a lot of conversation about conversation this commission has had about geographic equity, about where housing's being placed throughout the county. I can tell you the particular conversation that I remember occurring was Councilmember Porterfield was asking for better estimates from planning on school district impact, because there were several affordable housing properties that were being developed in the southeast region where overcrowding was already occurring and in schools, and more the fear was that was going to continue to the point that it would no longer be sustainable. And I think several of us are cognizant of what many of our schools in the southeast are going through. They are over capacity. So I can tell you, I stood up in that meeting and assured members that the commission had geographic equity at the top of its list when it was coming through conversations about funding rounds. I even noted that there were there were Barnes Fund awards in the urban core district that I represent and in other urban core districts. while I do believe that there will rightfully so always be scrutiny on how contracts are awarded, especially when it comes to minority owned contracts. That has come up several times in council, and rightfully so, regarding Barnes Fund awards. The most recent and most intense conversation we had is one we've had previously as a commission, and it is about geographic equity. So as a commissioner, I sort of balance, yes, I do believe that there's something that's probably a little out of lane on this contract issue. I also have to acknowledge that the council conversation as a whole has been, we want to see more affordable housing occurring throughout the county, and in that conversation in the urban core. And again, it just so happens that this actual project is in the urban core. It's in the district I represent, but it's within the districts that council members have been asking, quite frankly, for more affordable housing to occur. So.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. I read the rules and regulations. I saw section D5 where it's expressly called out. But is there also language in there, and I might have overlooked it, where just simple, commission approval would have allowed this to go through despite that language from a pure legal perspective? That's all I'm asking.
This is Macy. We would have had to amend the contract to allow it, which would have required going to council. Really, it's not advisable that we include this language in our contracts, just because this language is in here for a reason. We don't want people, giving Metro dollars to their spouses to do projects. You know what I mean? It
Sure. No, I completely understand. Although I respect Mr. Latimer's efforts in keeping himself separate from it.
Absolutely.
And this project is virtually done, correct? It's virtually complete?
Yes. Yes.
So how do you really undo this in that instance?
I mean, I don't
They just
think
pay
you
back the
do.
dollars, I guess, if we were so chose.
Yes. And I mean, and in Mr. Latimer's defense, that does seem extreme.
Yes, I would agree. I'm just trying to understand the walls we're in, if you will, from a legal and realistic perspective.
I'm sure Mr. Latimer has informed his board of such, but you could always ask him to have the same conversation with his board that he's having with us, and let them know that he is in or was in direct violation of his contract. You all can ask him not to do this again. I mean, I think there are a couple of different options.
Okay.
But like you said, the asking them to pay all the money back for something that's 95% built seems a little harsh.
That seems extremely harsh. I would agree. Like I said, I'm just trying to feel the walls of where we are, and certainly from a legal perspective, I very much want to be sensitive to counsel, obviously, and the law at the same time. So I just wanted to make sure I understood just kind of big picture. I myself, believe all good intent was intended here, and people were trying to do the right thing. And so I would probably opt for the more lenient options than the harsher. But that's just my opinion, and obviously open it back up to the rest of the commission.
James or Jim, do you two, any comments on what we've heard from Eddie and Macy?
I'd say I'm in the same camp as Laura. It's, in the end, is it a project? Is the project now as complete? Is it what we bargained for on the front end? Is it what was promised on the front end, and was it delivered? appropriately? I mean, outside of this issue, but was it delivered on budget? I mean, everything from that standpoint, how is what's the situation we find ourselves in? If we had said, if the contract amendment had gone through the proper channels and been approved, would anything be different today than with that?
If that was me,
I'm not being
Sorry, Eddie.
rhetorical. I'm not. It's not a rhetorical question. It's kind of factual. Is the project is completed? What was bargained for in the front end?
it's my understanding that Mr. Latimer is in compliance with the rest of his contract, except for this little issue.
I feel like we have, and also you gave us 2 lots and we got 4 homes out of it. We went through that whole, regime change and everything. We got a lot of help from a lot of people to get that done. I would love to have anybody of interest after this. If anyone is interested, I would be more than glad to show you the homes. They're kind of cute.
Chair, can I, so it seems like we have to decide if we're going to make, and Macy, I'll lean on you too, if we're going to, seems like we have to take some kind of action and what a motion would look like on that action. Is that accurate, Macy? I mean, is that something you would advise as our legal counsel?
Yes, I mean, I think you need to address it somehow. And so a motion for, how you want to address this would be advisable.
And Macy, you are not necessarily recommending a contract, and it sounded like you weren't necessarily recommending a contract amendment.
Well, I
Which
think
to me seems the easiest path forward.
if you amend the contract, first of all, Eddie's not going to be able to complete this for several more weeks because we're going to have to go back to council. And because it's 95% done, I think if we were, 25% into the construction, it would be a different story. But I mean, these houses are essentially done, is my understanding. So I just don't know that it really makes a whole lot of sense here.
Let me ask this: is there something where we can? And I'm just throwing out ideas here. Is there something we can say as an act of censure? Mr. Latimer will not be eligible for one round of funding. Something along those lines. It says, recognize it's an issue. We've got it. There is, what I would say is, try to find something that where there's a punishment, if you will, that matches up with the with the breach.
They have a current application open for funding round 8.
I like the idea of a verbal.
Ideas.
I think that's where you're going, Jim. But I'm not sure about, I guess, the magnitude of not allowing them to be in another round as a first pass. I mean, I agree that we need to have some type of reprimand so this does not happen again. But I'm just trying to think about what's our best route, though.
Yeah, I will add, I mean, this is, as we know as commissioners, this work is hard enough to find. I mean, there are a lot of good applications, don't get me wrong, but I mean, we just had $1 million+ award returned to us out of no, none of us could control that. That was a direct result of the administration's decisions financially.
I'm throwing that out as an idea.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else along those? Anything else? I mean, something where we take an action, but it matches up with this overall situation. I mean, quite honestly, I see this as an oversight. I see it as a mistake. It's something that I could feel perfectly comfortable explaining to somebody as to why we took an action that wasn't an action on it.
Yeah, I mean, we have kind of competing kind of issues. One is there are 4 housing units that are nearly finished, and our issue is providing affordable housing. So we want those units to get finished. The other part is the integrity and the reputation of the fund. So something, and that's what I think where we are is we've got to, we could write something very strong that says, you know, that there's been a breach of contract, it's a violation of trust, that we're profoundly disappointed. Then the next question is there anything else, like not holding back from one round of funding? And that's again why I asked Colby, because I'm most concerned about the integrity of the fund in relationship to the council, because they are the ones who grant the funds, and we want them to continue.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Ashley, can you remind me what the total grant amount was and how much is this portion of that grant, dollar-wise?
The portion of that grant, I think, is $20,000.
And what was the total grant?
The total grant for round 6. Sorry, I don't have that pulled up.
That's all right. I'm asking on the fly.
That's okay. Give me 1 second. I'll tell you.
I'm working behind a laptop. I don't have my multi-screens either, so.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's important information, but in some ways it's not, because it's really more the principle and the reputational issues.
No, I agree. I just wanted to be reminded again,
the total grant was $533,690.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think I agree with everything everyone has said. I don't want to do something that doesn't fit the breach. I think we're trying to get these houses complete and into the community. But I am concerned about the public scrutiny of it. That's more what I'm concerned about than actually just moving past it. Because Eddie, I think your letters detail well everything you went through to try to bring this to everyone's attention. I don't think there was any intent to purposely mislead anyone or do anything with ill will. I think we've all worked with you enough on this commission to know that would not be the intent. So, but I do want to make sure we are stewards of these dollars, and whatever we need to do to really do that, I think is important. I'm a little bit at a loss of what to say. I mean, I think a strong public censure is one thing, but I do kind of go back to what Khaki said, is when this reaches council, we can explain it, but how is that going to go over with them?
Chair, can I ask one more question on Macy? It sounds like there are options that we can take that would not, it sounds like the only reason it would go back to council is if we were to amend the contract. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. We're not proposing sending anything to council. We're not amending the contract. It will not go back to council for a vote or anything like that.
Got it. Yeah, and obviously council members get news of things other than things put on their agenda. I don't want to give anybody the impression.
This is a public meeting. This is a public meeting.
Right.
Leave if they know.
I will say I have not had, I'm gonna step out of my commissioner shoes and my council member shoes for just a second. As the council member whose district in which this is occurring, I have not had questions from other council members about this particular project. Good, bad, or indifferent, have not had inquiries.
I'm gonna make a suggestion then. I suggest that what we do, that we take for the record, put in Eddie's letter, and we expressed something, some sentences about our disappointment in this. We do have a long record of working with Affordable Housing Resources and with Mr. Latimer. This particular breach is out of character. It's not something that has been the norm. We've had a long discussion on it. We accept his apology on this, and we'll further scrutinize this as our relationship with Affordable Housing Resources going forward, and submit his letter into the record.
Yeah, if you would put that in a motion, Jim, I'll second that.
Don't make me say it again. Ashley, were you taking notes?
It's a long motion. It's a long motion.
But you get my drift that it you know, we have it's basically explaining the situation. We have a relationship here. We have limited resources out there in the affordable housing situation. This relationship, this is uncharacteristic. Mistake was made. We recognize that. We submit his apology. We accept his apology and agree to move forward. But we will keep our eyes open and scrutinize going forward. And I'll move that.
And I would like to add one item to that, Jim, we will scrutinize that for all grantees. I think that's what's important here, for all grantees, not just affordable housing resources.
Agreed.
I second that.
Is there any discussion? Okay, if there's no discussion, I'll do my roll call vote. Khaki for 6 Warren.
I agree.
Councilmember Colby Sledge.
Aye.
James Simmons.
Aye.
Laura Coleman.
Aye.
Jim Schmitz.
Aye.
Chris Farrell. And I vote aye as well. Thank you, Eddie. We appreciate your time today.
If I may, I just really want to thank y'all for this and accepting our apology. And we apologize. I'm sorry we're here, but thank you for understanding and allowing us to complete this project. Thank you.
Well, great. And I know Colby and Jim, I don't know if you still have to leave at 3:30. There is one more thing that is a voting item.
I can hang.
I'll hang. I'll be late my next one, but it'd be your fault.
You can blame me. We will go quickly through these. There's 2 grant extension requests. One is for Crossroads Campus. One is for Westminster Home Connection. I know the details for Crossroads Campus, some of that related to their zoning. I believe that was completely out of their control, just from what I know about that.
Their zoning requirements were actually resolved administratively. They did not have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, actually.
Okay, great. So if you want to just give us a really quick rundown of both of those, Ashley, then we can put a motion out for those.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one with Crossroads Campus, they're seeking a 12-month extension on their previously extended grant from round 5. They had, several setbacks, first with zoning and then with some finance issues. They did get an agreement from MDHA to move forward pending their financing. They expect to close on the actual financing with their funding partner, Nonprofit Finance Fund, at the end of February with a ground break in early March. They expect that they will probably need another smaller extension beyond that. This one, should it be approved, in order to actually complete the project due to some bottlenecks due to COVID, as well as their financing issues that they previously had. But they expect to move forward with construction in March as planned. And then Westminster Home Connection, they're also requesting a 12-month extension. Terry is here as well in the audience, should you have any questions specifically for her. They actually they know that they have to raise the additional matching funds that they'll need to complete the project. However, they do have the cash reserves to complete the project without the additional matching funds if necessary. They have completed 20 of the 68 development parts of projects that they have, and they decided to scale up all of the projects due to some lien requirements that they had on their projects. So they actually ended up making all of their projects larger rather than doing smaller projects and larger projects. They just made them all larger, which is part of the delay in some of the construction. But they have secured some new liens, and they have some others that they're currently talking to in order to complete the 68 units that they promised through the proposal that was approved.
I would move approval of both these extensions.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and move to vote. Becky Frisick Warren.
Aye.
Councilmember Colby Sledge.
Aye.
James Simmons.
Aye.
Laura Coleman.
Aye.
Jim Schmitz.
Aye.
Chris Farrell. And I will vote aye as well. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you sticking around for that.
Sure. Take care, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
See you both soon.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay. We got a few more things on here, Ashley, a lot of it having to do with the grant application update and then a 2020 annual report draft review. I'm gonna let you run through those if you would like.
Sure. I actually did move the annual report off of the agenda that I sent you, and that'll be for next time. I was mostly concerned with timing for all of the guests this time around. So I will have that in February for everyone, but I will go ahead with the update from round 8 just so you have an idea holistically of what we've received so far, what we're doing. So we received 10 total applications, 3 of those for home buyers and then 7 rental applications, totaling $10,507,303. That's about $3,062,303 over what we have available. So about 30% less than what we actually have funding available that we'll be able to fund going forward. So we won't be able to fulfill the full amount requested. The review team will consist of 5 people. One of you may know very well. She happens to be on this call, and the chair of the commission, Gina, will be a part of our review team, as well as Tony Shaw from THDA, Angela Harrell from she's the Senior Community Development Program Manager for MDHA, Joan Fleming, a VP and Residential Lending and Community Development for Citizens Bank, and then Jody Moody as well, a VP from the Matthews Company, will be making up all of our review team. So we'll be, or I say the review team will be looking through those applications throughout February, and then we will meet to finalize our recommendations for funding, and those will be presented to the commission at the end of February on the 23rd. So expect to vote on funding recommendations at that meeting. I think that's all I have for that.
Ashley, this is Khaki. I do have a question. What is the diversity on that five-member review panel? I'm wondering what the racial diversity is in the makeup.
I actually have not met Tony or Angela in person, so I don't know they're what makes them diverse people. I only know Joan Fleming because her picture is on the Citizens Bank website. She is a Black woman from that works in Nashville, and Jody is the only man comprising the review committee, which is mostly comprised of women, and he's white.
I just think it's important that we, as we're thinking about racial equity, that we're sure that review committee, our commission as a whole has less diversity than we would probably like. We don't have complete control of that, although we could come up with some strategies. But I do think the review committee is something we do have power over, and we should be sure that it is diverse. And I think, given what I know of those people, I think you've achieved a diversity level that would make me feel confident.
That's great. And I did reach out to some other folks because obviously DEAI work is something that's very close to me and a part of my background and my professional career. So that is something that I'm keeping at the forefront of my mind as well. And I will ask the folks on the review team as well, what are the areas of improvement that they see within the application where we can make the application and the application process overall more equitable for our folks that are applying. I did reach out to a couple of other folks that were unable to participate, namely Mr. Gobin, who you actually suggested, and then as well, I tried to reach out to somebody from the Equity Alliance, but never heard back. So those are still things, if we can think of other partnerships, and especially I know we still have some folks in the audience. If you know of anybody that would be a perfect fit for our review team in future funding rounds, please email me, ashley.brown2@nashville.gov, for any suggestions for people that might comprise future funding round review team. I think it would be very helpful. Sometimes you just don't know everybody who to reach out to, but certainly always taking suggestions and reaching out to folks that would be a great fit.
Thank you, Ashley. I think the final piece is that Hannah will be back with us next month. She has been on maternity leave. We saw her briefly at the task force meeting that we had last week, so I think we're all looking forward to having her back. And then everybody will be back with Kathy and Hannah. So we look forward to our February meeting. And I don't know if there's any other announcements that you have, Ashley.
I did also include a link to a grant extension request form that I put together. It mostly has questions that you all tend to ask. You are welcome to go through it, but namely the current financial situation, the updated project timeline, the primary reason for those folks requesting the actual extension. However, this isn't really a policy, it's more of a process by which we would receive those extension requests. So not necessarily changing anything about why people submit those requests at this point. So I would say that we maybe bring that conversation to our next meeting. I did include some questions in my meeting packet for you all just about what kinds of questions or what kinds of expectations you have around future extension requests, should they be needed, and how they are handled, because I know that in the past there have been some questions about subjectivity as it applies to the extension requests and how they're accepted, or well, none have been declined at this point, but moving forward, I think having a more cohesive policy around our extension requests, including how often those folks report back to us or check in as part of their extension update, would be helpful. So we don't have to address all of that right now, but if you have any specific questions about the actual request form itself, which I did include, I'm happy to answer those. Nothing? Okay, I also did spend a lot of time updating the 3 sites related to the commission. So the Barnes Fund website, the application site, and the Housing Trust Fund Commission site. So all 3 of those have been overhauled as far as updated with current information and attachments as well. So if you go through there and it doesn't look exactly the same, that's because it isn't. It is updated. So if you see anything on there, want anything added to any of those pages, please let me know. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, we will see you all in February. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.